Before we dive into the implementation details, let's go ahead and take a look at what you will be building in these sections. You can see that this is a NearMe app. It's going to tell you where you are, which is in Cupertino in the simulator. And I can go ahead and type anything I want if I want to search for something. Now, if I go ahead and type in coffee, it will show me all the different coffee places near my current location. I can also change the view to a list view to better see what each coffee location kind of looks like and what are their names. But since coffee and gas and groceries is such a common thing, I've also added these categories that you can simply select, and it will filter out all the different things that are available. And you can see that the filter also works when you are going to a list and you are selecting these different things. We will be building this using iOS framework for SwiftUI. We will be using the MVVM Design Pattern and the built-in controls for SwiftUI for Map. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, everyone, let's go ahead and get started. So in this lecture, we'll be doing a couple of different things. We will be adding to the info.plist file so we can request access to the permission for the user, which we will need in the future when we are asking the user for their location. So for the position, we will have to go to info.plist file. And this is a requirement. If you don't do this, if you don't ask for the permission, then you will never know where the user is. So because we are trying to build an application where we can find out where the user actually is, and then based on their location, we are giving them suggestions about coffee shops, burger shops, or whatever they want. So it is very important that we find out users' location. And in order to find out users' location, we need to ask them that, hey, is it okay that if we use your location, because our app kind of depends on it. So let's go ahead and add a key. And this key, as you can see, is called privacy location when in usage description. There are some other keys also if you can add. Right now, I'm just going to add this key. And this will be the message. NearMe requires your location in order to provide best recommendations. Okay, you can write anything you want over there. That's perfectly fine. Now let's go to the content view. You can see on the content view, we display kind of like the hello world. If I want to display a map, the first thing I'm going to do is import Mapkit. Mapkit contains the views that I need in SwiftUI that will enable me to display a map. And in iOS 14 and SwiftUI, they have introduced a map view, which you can use. There are several different overloads of the map view. You can see you can pass in the coordinate region with annotation content, and a lot of different stuff. But right now what we want to do is to just display kind of like a default marker, just some latitude and some longitude, and that's it. In order to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new group for extensions. And we will go ahead and add a new extension. I mean, this is not, you don't really need this, but we will need this in the future. So why not just implement it right now? And I'm going to go ahead and extend MK coordinate region. So I'm going to extend that. So I'm just going to also provide extensions over here just for the name of the file so that we know that this is an extension. And in this, I'm going to simply create like a default region. So I'm going to go ahead and say extension MK coordinate region. You can see it's not really coming up because we still need to import a couple of different things, which is Mapkit, and now it should be okay. I'm going to go ahead and create a static function, which will be called default region. So I'm just going to say default region, and it is MK coordinate region. That's what it's going to return from this particular property. And now I can simply copy paste something, some sort of a region. It can be any region that you want. So there we go. All right. So this default region is going to point to our Apple campus. So you can use anything you want. And let me see what's going on over here. not function, sorry, it's a var. There we go. Now we can go back to our content view and we can try to use our map. So map, and we can pass in the coordinate region. Now pay close attention to what you can actually pass in, because the type that you need to pass in to the map function for coordinate region is not MK coordinate region, it's basically binding MK coordinate region. So if I try to pass in something like this, coordinate region, and simply saying MK coordinate region dot default region, the one that we just implemented, it's not really going to work. It's going to complain because the default region is of type MK coordinate region, but it actually wants the binding MK coordinate region. All right, so there are many ways to fix this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and simply create a small function. And I'm doing all of these different things because we will eventually need these things in the future. So that's why I'm kind of like laying the groundwork for all of these things. So I'm creating a function called binding, and it's going to get region, and it's going to return me the binding MK coordinate region. And from here, I can simply go ahead and return dot constant MK coordinate region dot default region. So basically, now we have wrapped around this default region, which is MK coordinate region, with binding. And now I can simply go ahead and call get region. Let's go ahead and build it. And now it's successful. Let's go ahead and try to refresh our screen. And let's try to run it also. Okay, so we can see over here that we have added the region. Let's go ahead and try to run it on an actual simulator. Although this is an actual simulator, but sometime you will see that the Xcode previews doesn't really work as expected when you are working with, when you're working with some other place. And there we go. So at least we get our map to get displayed. So that's perhaps pretty good. Now I can go ahead and zoom in and zoom out of the map and everything. So that should be okay, right? The other thing that we want to do is now we want to find the user's location. And that is what we're going to do in the next lecture. So let's go ahead and do that in the next lecture. All right, so before we go to the next lecture, I do need to tell you that the MK coordinate region, these latitude and longitude coordinates are not for Apple campus. This is for somewhere in Houston near the Museum of Fine Arts. And you can always change this latitude delta and longitude delta if you want to kind of zoom in. So if I go ahead and say 0.05 and 0.05 and run it, then you'll be able to see that it's kind of like zooming into the museum district area. Houston Museum of Natural Science, Herman Park. So that is the latitude and longitude for that particular area. All right, so that's why it is zooming over here and not Apple campus, because these latitude and longitude belong to Houston and not of the Apple campus. All right, so now let's go ahead to the next lecture, and we'll be talking about how to find the user's current location. All right, so our next task is to display the user's location on the map. For this, I'm going to go ahead and add a new folder, and I will call it Managers. And the reason that we are doing that is that I'm going to create something called a location manager, and the location manager will be responsible for giving us the updated location of the user. So let's go ahead and add that. I will add a file called location manager. And now let's go ahead and implement it. Import Mapkit, class location manager. It is going to be conforming to NS object, inheriting from NS object. And we will also go ahead and make it conform to the observable object. And you'll see that why we do that. And inside over here, we will create a private instance of location manager, which is of type CL location manager. So CL location manager is actually already built in to the iOS framework. It's part of the Mapkit. What is it part of the foundation? Actually, let's go ahead and remove that. Let's go ahead and build it. There we go. So it's part of the Mapkit. All right. And this is going to give us a location. once a location is available, we are going to go ahead and say CL location, and we will initialize it to nil, and we will assign it over there. And since this is marked with published, whenever we assign this, it is going to throw an event which our UI can handle or our view model can handle. Okay, let's go ahead and override the init, which is a constructor. We will call the super, if there is any super for NS object, we should call that. And then we are going to go ahead and set for the location manager, which is of type CL location manager, we're going to set the delegate to self. It is going to complain right now because we are not conforming to the delegate. Don't worry about it. We will fix that issue. Next up, we are going to talk about the accuracy of location manager. I'm going to set the accuracy to be the best accuracy, which basically means that it is going to take a bit of time, not that much time, but a little bit of time to find your location. But for our case, it should be okay. Next, we're going to set the distance filter, and I'm just going to set it to none, which basically means that we are not filtering on any distance. So if it's 5 miles, 10 miles, 50 miles, it doesn't really matter. Next up, we will request for the permission. And this is the most important step because remember that in info.plist file, we added this particular key. When you request for the permission, it is going to ask you that, hey, do you accept? Do you give your permission so that we can track you, we can get your location? And finally, we will call location manager dot start updating location. This means that whenever the person moves, whenever the user is going to move from one place to the other place, the start updating location is going to give us the updated location. Next, I'm going to go ahead and create an extension for the location manager. And I'm going to make sure that I am using or conforming to the CL location manager delegate. Now, some of you might be asking that why did I create an extension? Why can't I just do it over here? You can definitely do it inside this class. It's always a good idea to separate out your code a bit. So I know that this particular extension, I will write all the code that will be related to the delegate functions of CL location manager delegate. So it's basically just for the organizational purposes. One of the functions, and the only function I will be interested in, is called did update locations. And did update location is part of the CL location manager delegate. It will be called whenever the user's location is updated. We will get the location equals to locations dot last. So we'll get the last location from an array. And if we were not able to get anything, we will simply return. And finally, we will go ahead and put it location equals to location. All right. We can also wrap this around in dispatch. So dispatch queue.main.async, just so that we know that this particular location is actually being set inside the dispatch because it is marked with published. And there you have it. This is how you will find the user's location. Now, we are finding the user's location, which is right here, and we assign it to our location property, which is right there, which is great, but we still have to display the location or display the user on the screen. And for that, we can use the content view, and the map itself does have something called a show user location. That's fine, but we still have to call the location manager inside the content view somehow. So instead of calling it right inside the content view, we will create a view model, and the view model will use the location manager to find the location. So in the next lecture, we'll be working on creating our place list view model, which will keep track of everything that is happening on our content view screen. So let's go ahead and implement our view models. All right, so now let's go ahead and start implementing the place list view model, which will be responsible for the entire screen, which displays the map and anything that goes onto that screen. I'm going to go ahead and add a brand new group, and I will call this view models. Next, I'm going to go ahead and add a new file. Swift file is perfectly fine. And we can call this place list view model. There we go. Let's go ahead and import combine because I might be using combine actually. All right, here we go. Place list view model, which is an observable object. It's going to conform to that. And that can only be applied, the observable object interface can only be applied to the classes. That's why the place list view model is a class. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and create a private property, which is my location manager. I don't really want this to be exposed to the view. We will create it as a location manager. Inside the init initialization function of the place list view model, we will go ahead and initialize our location manager. And by doing this, the location manager is going to invoke everything inside the init, which is also going to start updating the user's location. Now, what we want to do is when the user location is updating or constantly updating when the user is moving, we want to get the updated location. So I'm going to go ahead and say location manager dot location, which you can see that this is a bindable property that we created, a published property, dot sync. So now I'm going to subscribe to it. I will get the location, and now I can do something with the location. Now, whenever we are doing this kind of a subscription, the sync is going to return a cancelable event, basically a reference to the publisher. So we need to make sure that we are keeping a hold of it, or else we will lose that, meaning the memory will consume it or the memory will not refer to it. So that's why we are creating cancelable, and that is part of the combine. So that's why we imported combine. Let's go ahead and assign cancelable over here. There we go. So we are holding up that reference, so making it alive. We will get the location. So go ahead and first of all, we will make sure that the location is unwrapped. After the location is unwrapped, we can put it into our own property, which is inside place list view model, which will show the current location. So I am going to go ahead and add a new property over here, which will be current location. And you can see that the current location is not of type CL location, it's CL location coordinate 2D. So for that, I will go ahead and import Mapkit. So the whole purpose is that from the view model, if we want to provide anything to the view, I want it to be in a very raw format, like location 2D, which is a structure which contains the latitude and longitude. Now I can go ahead and perform a dispatch queue.main.async, and I can perform set the current location equals to location.coordinate. Now, since the current location, which we declared right over here, is marked with published, every time I'm going to assign a new location or new value to it, it's going to notify whoever is listening. So now our UI can actually listen to it. All right. So let's go back to our user interface, which is our content view right there. And you can see that in the content view, we're not even using the protocol or for the place view model. So I'm going to first of all create an instance of place list view model. There we go. All right. So we have created the instance of place list view model. Now we want to return the location that we are actually getting. So how do we do that? How do we return the location? Right now you can see that we created a function called getRegion, which is kind of like displaying or returning hard-coded location. But we don't really want to do that. We want to get the actual location. So let's see how we can do this. I'm going to go inside the getRegion function. And inside the getRegion, I can go ahead and possibly I can say let coordinate equals to place list view model dot current location, which is actually coordinate. If this is not working, if there's a problem, then go ahead and return a constant value. And in this case, I can return the default region because something bad happened and we are not able to get the actual location. If, however, we were able to get the location, then I can say constant value again, mk coordinate region, And we can pass in the center, which will be coordinate, and the MK coordinate span, which will be, you can pass in anything you want over here. I want to zoom it a little bit, so I'm going to pass in 0.05, which means that it is going to return a little bit like zoomed in into the map. All right, there we go. The map currently that we are using is kind of like a very plain kind of a map, which simply says coordinate region. It has nothing to do with show user location or anything. But as we explained earlier on, you have many different ways of showing the map. This is a coordinate region. This is annotation and all that stuff. Interaction mode, show user tracking or show user location with user tracking. We can use this one at this point. So in this case, we are again going to call get region. Interaction mode. Now, what exactly is interaction mode? Interaction mode simply means that how you are going to be interacting with the map. All right. So what kind of an interaction mode should we provide over here? Well, this is completely up to you. What kind of an interaction mode you want? Do you want the user to pan and then, pinch zoom and all those things? I'm just going to pan in or pass in all, which means that they can do whatever they want. Show user location. Yes, please. True. And user tracking mode, meaning if the user is moving, what should the map do? So we want the map to start tracking the user. So let's go on the top, and we are going to declare a user tracking mode, which I have declared right here. And I'm saying follow. So kind of like follow the user. If the user is walking around, try to follow the user. And now I can pass in the user tracking mode over here. User tracking mode. All right. And it might be the binding property, so we're going to have to pass it like this. All right. So there you have it. Let's go ahead and try to run it and see what happens. And there we go. And you can see that now our user is actually displayed right there, which is great. Now, I'm obviously not in Cupertino, but you can change these location by going to your features in a simulator location, and you can see that right now it is selected as Apple. You can do freeway drive or city bicycle ride or city run or even a custom location. So if I'm going to go to freeway drive, sometime it starts on its own, but let's see. Okay, might have to zoom in a little bit. You can see that if I zoom in, you can see a little bit that it is actually doing that. But when I zoom in, what's happening is that it keeps on resetting because the user is actually moving. So it gives me a different point of view of zooming in. But you can definitely see the user is going along, or it's in a car. I don't want the user to be in a car right now. I just want the user to be in Apple Campus. We're just going to use that. All right, but you can change these things any way you like. So this is great because we are able to display the user's location now. Now, the next step for us would be to display the landmarks. Well, first, we need to find out the closest landmarks, like closest burger store, closest, coffee shops. And right now, if you noticed, if I launch the app, we don't even have a text box to write something, to say something that, hey, I want a burger, or I'm looking for, some other thing. So we don't even have a text box to search for those place marks. So we definitely need to add a text box, and then we will be able to search all the landmarks, and then eventually we'll be able to display the landmarks. So let's go ahead and work on the text box and also look at that how we can perform a request and get all the landmarks closest to the user's location. All right, so now it is time for us to find the landmarks. But before we do that, we need to go ahead and update our code to accommodate a text box. Right now, you can see that in our content view, we are simply displaying the map. Well, the question still is that if we're only displaying the map, then how is the user going to say that, well, I want coffee, I want burger, I'm looking for a restaurant, I'm looking for a gas station. So let's go ahead and fix that. The first thing I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and embed the map into a VStack. There we go. So nothing really different. I mean, it looks exactly the same. After this, what I want to do is I want to create a text field. So let's go ahead and do the text field. And text field is actually pretty simple to create. I'm just going to say text field, and we can use some sort of a text over here. I'm just going to say search and the bindable string. Now, the good thing about this bindable string is that you can either have a string right over here, somewhere in the state, or you can create it in the view model. And for now, I'm going to just go ahead and create it over here, and I will tell you the reason why we're doing that later on. So search term, string, there we go. And now I can go ahead and simply say search term. This means that anytime I'm going to pass anything or write anything into the text box, it is going to go into a variable, a state variable called search term. Okay, so there's our text box, a little bit of text box you can see. We can also go ahead and say text field style. And the text field style we want is the rounded border text field style. And since we're putting it in the VStack, it might be a good idea to go ahead and add a bit of padding to the VStack. There we go. And now it looks much better. Okay, so now what we want to do is when the person types in the text box and presses the return button in the keyboard, we want something to happen. We want to submit it and we want to perform the search. So if you look at the text box, it does have a little bit of different overloads. So if I type in text box over here or text field, you will see this one, it actually says on editing changed, and this one also says on editing change as well as a commit. So the remaining part, or most of the part, is the same. We're going to bind it to search term. Editing change basically means that whenever we are typing in the text box, do we want to do something? For now, I'm just going to leave it blank, not really going to do anything over there. And this is the one that we're interested in, which is on commit, which is going to get fired when we actually write in the text box and press a return button in the keyboard. And this is where I want to go ahead and call or get all landmarks based on what we have typed in the text box. But how do we get the landmarks? We can go ahead and add the code into Location Manager, or we can create a different service to get all the landmarks. Or for now, I can simply go ahead and add it right there in the view model. But you can create a separate service for getting the close by landmarks. If you think that this is going to get bigger, then perhaps it's a good idea to move all the code that I'm about to write into a separate service. Function, search, landmarks. You're going to pass in something search term, which will be a string. And based on the search term, we are going to go ahead and search for landmarks near the user's location. For this, I'm going to first of all going to go ahead and create a request, which is mk local search request. So let's go ahead and create that. And I'm going to go ahead and set the property, which is called the natural language query, to the search term, which means this is basically what we are searching for. Next, I'm going to create an instance of mk local search and pass in the request, which is request, and we're simply going to pass in the request. Let's go ahead and add the equal to sign. And now we can perform our search by calling search.start. It's going to give us a completion handler. The completion handler is going to be consisting of the response and the error, or hopefully there is no error. If there is an error, we're going to go ahead and unwrap the error, and we can go ahead and print it out. Else, if there is no error, then still we are going to go ahead and unwrap the response that we are getting from the search.start function, and then eventually, hopefully, it's going to give us the map items. So we're going to go ahead and simply get all the map items. Let's go ahead and also display the map items so that we know that we have gotten something. So this is our function. It's called search landmarks. Now we can go back to our content view, and right over here we can say place list view model dot search landmarks, and then we can simply pass in the search term. Awesome. Let's go ahead and run this. We're not really displaying the landmarks anywhere, but if we are able to get the landmarks, we should be able to display it on the console. So I'm going to simply search for coffee. And you can already see that as soon as I press the Enter key or Return key, it prints out all of this different information. Each one of them is an object of type map item or a place mark. And you can see that it contains the name of the coffee or name of the coffee shop. There's Starbucks. You can see Starbucks, Pete's Coffee, and many other coffee locations. Maybe another coffee shop called Bittersweet. So at least we are able to get all the different coffees or whatever the user is searching for, and we can display it on the console. Let's go ahead and run it again. And instead of coffee, now let's search for burger. Press Enter. Okay, there we go. So now we got some burgers. You can see over here, Mr. Beast Burger, Burger King. So everything is related to burger. Five Guys, the Habit Burger Grill, Wendy's, again another Burger King, and so on. So it really depends what kind of positions or what kind of locations or landmarks are available near my current locations, and it's trying to find out all of those different landmarks. Now this is great. We can find the landmarks and we can print it on the console. But the real question is, well, user will not be looking at the console, user will be looking at the screen where the map is. So how can we get those map items and somehow put it on the screen? So let's go ahead and do that in the next lecture. Now let's go ahead and talk about how we can finally display our map items, our search landmarks on the screen. Now, in order to put something on the screen, it is always a good idea to create some sort of a view model that is having all the data that the view requires. We have already created one view model, and you can see it's called the place list view model. I think we should create one other view model which will resemble a landmark. So I'm going to go into a view model and add a new file. Now, once again, you can call this place view model or landmark view model. You can call it anything you want. I'm just going to call it landmark view model. Landmark representing each landmark, like each coffee shop. You can call it place view model also. There we go. All right. So in this one, I'm just going to go ahead and import Mapkit. And you will see that why we are importing Mapkit, because we need to refer to the CL location coordinate 2D. That's why. Struct landmark view model. This will be an identifiable, and we will see why we're doing that also, because it needs to be identifiable for annotations for the map view to work. This landmark view model will take in a MK placemark. MK placemark basically simply represents each placemark, which means a coffee shop like Starbucks, a burger joint like Wendy's or Five Guys or Smash Burger. So these are all placemarks. We will go ahead and conform to the identifiable protocol by creating an ID property. And now we can go ahead and create some properties that we can return. So over here we can have placemark.name, or it's going to return an empty. We can also have the title of the placemark, which can be placemark.title, or we can unwrap it and it can return empty if it's failing to unwrap. And finally, the most important one is the coordinate, which is going to return you CL location coordinate 2D. And we're going to return placemark.coordinate. So this is our landmark view model, which represents every single landmark. Let's go back to our place list view model. And what we will do is we will create an array of landmarks. So I'm going to go over here and create an array of landmarks. Perfect. Now, when we are fetching the stuff, which means when we are inside the search landmarks, we got the map items. We can go through those map items by running a map items.map, and we will go ahead and return a new landmark view model which relies on the place mark, which we can get from that particular map item. So we can say $0, which is a map item dot place mark. Perfect. And this is going to return us something, and that something we can go ahead and assign to landmarks. There we go. So this is great. We were able to assign the landmarks. Now we need to feed these landmark view model array to our map. So let's go to the content view. Right now you can see the map is pretty basic. It doesn't even allow anyone to enter the annotations or the landmarks itself. So we need to use some other kind of a overload for our map for this to work. Right now we're using the region, interaction modes, show you the location, user tracking, and we can go ahead and add annotation items. This is the annotation items that we are talking about, which is going to be the landmark. And we can go ahead and say place list view model dot landmarks. So this means that we are assigning it the array of landmark view model. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get the landmark. For each landmark, we are going to go ahead and return something called a map marker, and we can simply go ahead and pass in the coordinate of that landmark. So coordinate. I may have to retype this whole thing again if it's not working, but looks like it should be okay. All right, let's go ahead and build our app now. Perfect. The map marker is basically a map marker annotation which is already provided in the Mapkit. If you don't like the map marker, you can use a map pin, but map marker is actually pretty good. It's a nice flat design and it looks really nice. Okay, so now let's go ahead and search for coffee shops. And there we go. So these are all the coffee shops near our area. One thing you will realize is that as soon as I try to move, you can see that it kind of snaps it in. Like if I try to move, it kind of snaps it in back to the center. And the reason for this is that our location is being set again and again. Because when we created the place list view model, inside this, we were calling the location manager and we are getting the new location every single time. And it gets assigned and then our map gets updated. Anyway, we can solve the problem later on. Right now, you should be happy to see that all the different coffee shops are actually being displayed. Now, if I go ahead and search for burger, you can see it changes because there are different burger joints near our area. Unfortunately, I cannot really interact with any of these landmarks for now. Maybe that will be fixed in the future. In iOS 14, it is still not working. So in this section, we have seen that we can search for different place marks and it will tell you all the different place marks on the map. That is great, but there are a lot of improvements that we can do. Like we should be able to a little bit pan and view different landmarks. We should be able to see these landmarks and places in a list instead of a map. And maybe it's also a good idea to put some sort of a category bar right here where people can just select coffee, gas, restaurant, hotels, just by clicking on it instead of typing it. So we will do all of those things in the next section. Let's go ahead and get started. Some people like to display maps and annotations and landmarks on a map, but other people like to display it in a form of a list or even view it in the form of a list. So how can we add a list view also along with our map view? The first thing we need is a way to switch between a list and a map. And what we can do is right over here, we can add some sort of a segmented control where the left side will be the map and the right side will be the list. So let's go ahead and first add our segmented control. A segmented control in SwiftUI is created using picker. So I'm just going to go ahead and add a picker. And a picker, you can see it has many different arguments it takes. So we're going to go ahead and say select. Selection. Where is the selection going to go? So the selection is going to go into a state variable. So we have to go ahead and define a state variable. So state private var, and I will simply say display type. But should we put it as a string, or do we even know the display types? Well, we actually know the display types. I mean, there are only two display types. Either it's going to be a map or it's going to be a list. So probably a good idea to go ahead and create an enum which can represent a display type. One of the case will be the map, and the other case can be a list. This means that we can change this display type into a display type enum. And by default, we can set it to map because it is a map. Now going down to our code over here for the picker, we can go ahead and pass in a bindable display type, which means that anytime a person is going to select a button of a segmented control, this display type will be populated with the correct value. Finally, for the content is what we want to be displayed in our segmented control. Now you can do all the fancy stuff over here. I'm just going to go ahead and say map. And the tag part is very important because the tag is the actual value that gets transferred to the selection. So the first tag is map, and the second tag will be list. You can go ahead and use images if you want to, but I'm just going to go with the basic text, and that's perfectly fine. So display type over here. Now the final thing is that we need to set the picker style, and this is where it becomes a segmented picker style. Let's go ahead and see how it actually looks like in our preview. So let's load the preview on the right hand side. We may have to load it again. Sometimes it doesn't work, but there we go. You can see that the segmented control is displayed with map and list, and the map is actually selected because of the selection display type and because we have initially selected the map. So this is great. Now based on the display type, based on my selection, I want to either display the map or I want to display the list. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, we will check over here. If the display type is equals to map, then we will display the map. So we will move all this code. And there we go. Else, if the display type is list, then we will do something else. All right. So how do we display a list? Well, we can go ahead and display the list right over here, but probably it would be a good idea to create a separate view which can display just the list. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my NearMe app and going to add a new folder, new group, and I will call it views. Inside the views, I'm going to go ahead and add a new SwiftUI view, and I would call it landmark list view. Landmark list view. And the landmark list view is only interested in displaying the landmarks, and that's it. That's its job, just to display the landmarks. And it's going to display, or it's going to have a very simple structure. So instead of the text, we will have a list. But now the list needs some sort of an array to work on. So the first thing probably we should do is we should go ahead and say that the landmark list view depends on the landmarks, which are of type landmark view model. So in order to create a landmark list view, you should pass in an array of landmark view model. We're going to create a list and we're going to pass in the landmarks. And for the ID, we're just going to use the ID, which is already a property on a landmark view model. We're going to get each landmark. And for each landmark, we can display a couple of different things. We can first of all put a VStack with some sort of an alignment also. So let me go ahead and put an alignment. And we can say leading is fine. And for spacing, 10 is fine. I'm going to also go ahead and delete the landmark list view preview because I don't really need it right now, but eventually if you need it, you can add it. And for text, we're going to say landmark.name. And maybe even I can go ahead and say that the text is a headline, a little bit more bold. And finally, we will have landmark.title. Perfect. Now going back to our content view, we can go ahead and simply display the landmark list view over here if the display type is list. This means I can say landmark list view, and now I need to pass in the landmarks, which I already have in the place list view model. I can go ahead and pass it. Let's go ahead and build it. Perfect. And I'm going to go ahead and run it in a simulator. Okay. Now let me go ahead and search for coffee. Great. So on the map, it displays and the map is selected. Let's go ahead and select the list view. Oh, great. Now I can actually see all the different coffee shops, but in a list. Isn't that cool and pretty simple? Well, let's search for something else. Let's search for burgers. Okay, so these are all the burgers that are closest to my location. And if I go and select the list, you can see In-N-Out Burger, Super Duper Burger, The Counter. So all of these burgers are available in a list format also. So this is actually really, really good that we are able to do that. At this point, I realized that, I order coffee too much and burgers too much and gas station also. I mean, these are just common requirements, right? I mean, why do I have to type these common things? Wouldn't it be a good idea if these common things like gas stations and restaurants and burger and coffees and all of those things are just somewhere on the top over here, like already selections, already available selections, and I can simply click on them and it will just work. This is called a landmark categories. So in the next lecture, let's go ahead and see that how we can add these categories so that we don't have to type for these common things like gas stations and coffee and restaurant and burgers. We don't have to type anymore. We can just tap on it and it will just work. So let's go ahead and see how we can do that in the next lecture. Now let's go ahead and implement our common landmark category view. This means that instead of writing gas or instead of writing coffee and burgers, we can just tap on some icons which will automatically search for common landmarks. In order to do that, I'm going to go ahead and add a new view, a SwiftUI view, and I would go ahead and call this landmark category view. Perfect. Now, inside the landmark category view, first of all, I need categories. That's the first thing, right? So you can go ahead and save your categories in the database. You can save it in a XML file or a plist file or a JSON file, whatever. But since our categories are constants, I'm just going to hard code it. There we go. Next, I'm going to go to the body and write some implementation. We do want it to be scrolling, so I'm going to start with a scroll view. And this scroll view, you can scroll in a horizontal direction. So I'm just going to say horizontal. Let's go ahead and check out our view over here. Okay, nothing there yet. Now I can go ahead and put an edge stack, horizontal stack, and I can go through each of these views. This will be categories. ID will be self because it is already string. And we will get each category. After getting each category, I can display the category, but it depends how you want to display the categories. I can use a button with an action and a label. For the button, I'm just going to go ahead and display the text for the category. You can already see it's displaying button. But what I'm going to do is replace it with a category. So it's going to say the name of the categories. There we go. Perfect. After that, we can go ahead and add some padding, some foreground color, some background color, and we can even clip shape. So I'm just going to copy that stuff because we have written those things a lot of different times before. So for button, I'm just going to add a couple of different things. Now, one of the things that you can see over here is a selected category thing. Selected category property. The selected category is going to keep track of which category you have selected. And based on your selection, the category can highlight between different colors, between white or a gray color. So let's go ahead and refresh our preview. And we will see that how the categories are being displayed. And hopefully we'll be able to select the categories also. So there we go. You can see the categories being displayed. Perfect. Now, if I run the app right now, and I select a category, the first thing you'll note is that, well, they're not really highlighting. And the reason that they're not highlighting is that we didn't really do anything in the action. You can see action or a button click is completely empty. So let's go ahead and implement that. So what should happen when you click on a particular action? Well, the first thing is that we will go ahead and provide or set selected category as a category. Great. Now when we select, ooh, great, it looks pretty good. And we can actually scroll. So this looks really, really good. But we still have a problem. Currently, we have selected a category, and we are inside a control called Landmark Category View. If we want to give the selected category to some other view, how do we do it? Well, one way of doing this is by creating a closure on selected category. And this will be a closure with a string argument, and it's not really going to return you anything. This means that you can go ahead and call on selected category and pass in the selected category. So I can simply say on selected category, and I can pass in the category. This means that anyone or a different control who is using the landmark category view can go ahead and use on selected category event or closure to get the selected category. Now let's go back to the content view, and we will try to use our control, which is a landmark category view. First, I'm going to go ahead and resume the preview. And where do we want to add this category? So I'm just going to add it a little bit above the picker. So I'm just going to say landmark category view. And the only thing you need to pass in over here is on selected category. That's a closure. We will get the selected category. And using the selected category, we can use placelist view model dot search landmarks and pass in the category. Remember I said that we are using search landmarks and we're going to pass in a search term. And why didn't we automatically bind it to a property in the view model? Well, that's the reason. We can simply go ahead and pass a particular category like burgers and coffees and restaurant to the search landmark function, which will perform the search for us. Now let's go ahead and see what is going on over here. This is saying on selected category is missing. Okay, that's not a big deal because this is more of a Xcode preview thing. We can go ahead and make it right. Let's go ahead and implement that on selected category. And in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and make it work by simply saying we're ignoring the actual category and we're not really doing anything. So this is in the landmark category view. Okay, let's go back to our content view and let's go ahead and run this. Oh, it looks really nice now because you can see the categories being displayed on the top. And if I select on a category, you can see that it is updating and it is telling me of all the different pharmacies, all the different hotels and everything. And I can even go to the list view and guess what? All the different hotels are already populated there. If I go ahead and click on gas, if I go ahead and click on groceries, coffee, you can see it is refreshing, as well as the map is also refreshing. This is super awesome. One of the last things that we need to do is sometime on the map, I want to just, pan the map, but it doesn't really allow me to pan. As soon as I'm panning, you can see that it kind of just sticks to the current user in the center. And the reason is that we are updating the location all the time. So if you look at our manager over here, we're calling start updating location. It means that it is always updating the location. So even if I am really not moving that much, it's always giving me the updated location and centering on that location. Now we do want it to center, that's fine, but we don't really want it to center all the time. If I am swiping or if I am panning using my finger, then I don't really want to center on myself. I just want to check out the map. So let's go ahead and check out that how we can create a recenter button that can also allow us to pan and then get to the center, but also allow us to perform a panning gesture on the map. All right, so now let's go ahead and look at our final issue that we are facing and that we need to fix. If I go ahead and run the application right now, and we have seen this issue numerous number of times, everything works correctly. I can check out the groceries, I can check out the hotels, I can check out the coffee shops, and so on. But if I try to pan a little bit, if I try to move the map, it just centers me again and again. It kind of forces me to see the center, or is focused on my location. I don't really want that. When I'm panning like this, I just want to be freely panning, meaning just looking at different portions of the map. So how can I do that? Well, there are a couple of different things that we need to do. The first thing we need to do is we need to add a gesture on our map. So let's go ahead and find our map right here. It's going to get a little bit complicated over here, or crowded, not complicated. I'm going to go ahead and say gesture. So we are trying to perform a gesture on the map, and I can perform a drag gesture. Here we go, drag gesture. And on the drag gesture, I can say on changed. So on change is fired whenever you're dragging, you're panning on something. Now, when the on change is fired, we need to set some sort of a flag which is indicating that, hey, we are dragging right now. So what I'm going to do is going on the top of this screen and going to declare a brand new property called isDragged, and we will initialize it to be false. Down over here in the onChange, we can now set this property to be isDragged to be true. This means that we are currently dragging because it is changing. We are dragging. When we are dragging, what we want to do is we want to make sure that we show some sort of a button. Overlay button on top of the map. Now, currently, we don't really have any kind of a button. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a brand new view. And you can create the button over there also, but I'm just trying to be a little bit more creating all of these different components. And I will call this recenter button. It doesn't really have to do anything with recentering. It's basically simply a button with a particular display. Now, in this button, I'm going to go ahead and create a very simple button with an action and a label. And if we look at this button, you will see that it's nothing more than a very simple button. Okay, great. But in the label, we can actually create a different display for the button by using a label and passing in kind of like a system image. So I'm going to go over here and say recenter. That's the label, that's the actual text. And the image can be anything. I'm just going to say triangle. Okay, it looks kind of like that. That's perfectly fine. I can add a bit of padding to it. Let's say 10. I can add a foreground color as well as a background color. And all of those things we have done previously. So I'm just going to copy paste it over here. You will see that we have a foreground color, we have a background color. And it looks pretty nice. When you tap a button, we need to tell the parent view that you have tapped the button. We're going to use the same approach as creating a onTapped closure, which is an empty closure, because we're not really passing anything to the parent. We're just simply saying that the button has been tapped. Over here in the recenter preview, I'm going to make sure that I pass something. So I'm going to just pass an empty closure. And in the action of the button, which is actually called when you press on the button, I don't even need to do that. I can simply go ahead and say onTapped over here because that is the correct signature. There we go. So now we have created a recenter button, which is simply a very simple button with a different display. And the reason I did it in a different file, like a recenter button view, and not in the content view is that I don't really want to pollute further my content view. It's already kind of getting out of control a little bit. Even though it's okay, but we can still refactor a couple of different things. Finally, let's go ahead and first check out our view. We can go ahead and add an overlay to our map. The overlay will be dependent on if the map is being dragged or not. If the map is being dragged, then I can go ahead and return any view, and in the any view I can return recenter button. Now, why are we using any view? Well, because isDragged can have two states. One of them can be if it's being dragged, but the other one can be if it is not being dragged. So if it is being dragged, we will do this, or other way around, meaning if it's not being dragged, let's see where we are. It's kind of getting out of control over here now. There we go. So probably we have to do it over here. Then we will go ahead and say any view, and we will return an empty view. An empty view basically simply means that it's empty. It doesn't really have anything. All right. Let's go ahead and build it so that we know that at least the code that we're writing is correct. We will also want to do some sort of an alignment for the overlay, and we will simply say bottom. And I would also try to add like a padding or something, and we can do the padding a little bit later, but if you want, you can simply go ahead and add some padding to it. All right. So if it is being dragged, then go ahead and show the recenter button. And if it is not being dragged, then we will do something else. Now, if you click the button, recenter button, which means that, okay, I'm done dragging, and go ahead and resume, like recenter it. We want to recenter it. So how do we recenter it? We will go ahead and call placelist view model dot start updating location. Don't worry, this function doesn't exist, and isDragged equals to false. The start updating location function we need to implement in our view model. So I'm going to go back to my view model, which is placelist view model. And in the placelist view model, I will go ahead and implement start updating location. So let's go ahead and add that function. You can add this anywhere you want. So right over here will be fine. You can see that the start updating location function is actually simply calling the start updates of the location manager. So in the location manager, now I will go and I will create a function called start updates as well as stop updates. So let's go to location manager and create these two functions. These functions are kind of like just a layer. I mean, they don't really do much. They call the location, the real location manager, dot stop updating and start updating. The other thing that we want to do is when we have assigned the location, when we have finally got the location in our placelist view model, which is at this point, we should go ahead and stop the updates. So self.locationmanager.stop updates. This means that we are only going to get the location once, and then we're just going to stop it. Unless and until the person says, hey, I want to recenter, and then we can get more locations. All right. All right. So now let's go to our content view. And let's go ahead and give it a try. I'm going to go ahead and run this. And now let's go ahead and move. Oh, now you can see that is pause. It's not really getting the location, but if I press recenter, now it's recentered. So this means that I can go and look at the map a little bit. I can look at the Sunnyvale, or I can move around the area, or I can go and hang around over here on the ocean side or the lake side. And then if I recenter, boom, I am recentered. So this is really good because it allows me to look at different groceries. So if I want to check out different groceries, oh, I can check out this one over here near the Sylvan Park. And if I want to quickly jump to my location, I can simply say recenter. So this allows us to pan the map, which is great. It also allows us to filter all of these different things. You can see that we are filtering, which is great, and panning. Perfect. So this concludes our building of the NearMe app completely using SwiftUI with the MVVM Design Pattern. If you like this section, the multiple sections that I've added, please go and rate and review the course on Udemy. And I really appreciate your rating, and rating reviews always help to provide and add more content, provide more updates. And thank you so much for your continuous support. Wow, that was a very long tutorial, and hopefully you have enjoyed it. If you want to support my work, then the best way would be to check out my courses on Udemy. I have a lot of different courses which can benefit you. You can see core data in iOS course, mastering RX Swift course, passive income for developers. If you want to know how to earn more money as a software developer, this course is for you. I have a SwiftUI course which is more than 23 hours and more. And then combined course, MVVM design, MVVM iOS development course in SwiftUI, Firebase course, RX Swift course. So everything you can imagine in iOS, I have created a course on it, and I am continuing to add more and more content, more and more courses on iOS development. So if you want to support, then the best way would be to check out the links in the description of the YouTube and use those links to purchase the course, because if you use those links, then I get to keep a little bit more revenue that will help to create and update new courses. Thank you so much for your continuous support.